In 1835, New York City burned through the night and into the next day. In 1871, Chicago's downtown was reduced to rubble in 3 days flat. $20 million in property vanished into ash in New York alone. That's over $600 million today. But the problem wasn't a lack of brave firefighters. It was that nobody could figure out how to pull water out of the ground fast enough. The solution to that crisis didn't come from a high-tech lab. It started as hollowed-out tree trunks buried under muddy streets, tapped by wooden plugs that firefighters had to hammer out by hand, while buildings collapsed around them. That crude wooden plug evolved over 2 centuries into one of the most critical, underappreciated engineering marvels on Earth. The modern fire hydrant sitting on your street corner has survived catastrophic fires, urban chaos, and 200 years of American innovation. By the end of this video, you'll never walk past a sidewalk the same way again. Because this isn't just a history of a piece of iron. It's the story of how America learned, the hard way, not to let its cities burn. To understand why the fire hydrant mattered, you have to understand what American cities were like without one. Picture a colonial town in the late 1600s. The buildings are wood, the roofs are wood, the streets are dirt, and when a fire starts, there is no fire department, no hose, no truck, just people. Firefighting in early America meant something called the bucket brigade. Neighbors would form a human chain from the nearest well, pond, or river straight to the flames, passing leather buckets hand to hand, as fast as human arms could move. It was exhausting, it was slow, and it rarely worked once a fire had a real head start. Entire blocks were sacrificed just to stop a blaze from spreading further. Some cities tried storing water in cisterns, big underground tanks scattered around town, refilled by rain or by hauling water in. But cisterns ran dry. They froze. And when a fire started somewhere the cisterns weren't, there was simply nothing to do but watch. This is the world fire hydrants were born into. A world where a single cooking accident or a lightning strike could take out an entire town, because there was no reliable way to get water to where it was needed fast. And the first real solution to that problem didn't come from a laboratory or a patent office. It came from something much simpler, a hollow log in the ground. That log is where our story really begins. Around 1600, American and European cities began burying wooden pipes to move water through town. Logs, drilled straight to the center, laid end-to-end underground. It wasn't elegant, but it worked well enough to carry water from a central source to different parts of the city. Here's where it gets interesting. When a fire broke out near one of these wooden mains, firefighters didn't have a valve to open. There was no hydrant. Instead, volunteer fire companies would dig straight down to the street, right down a wooden pipe, and bore a hole into it with an auger. Water under natural pressure would rush up into the hole, pooling in the dugout cavity, and firefighters would dip their bucket straight from that pool, or later, connect a hand pump to draw water out and push it toward the fire. Once the fire was out, they didn't want that water gushing into the street forever. So they'd hammer a wooden plug into the hole to seal it back up. Next fire, same street. Dig it up again, pull the plug. That's not a metaphor. That is the literal origin of the term fire plug, a nickname still used for hydrants in parts of the country today. And if you ever wonder why old-timers and firefighters sometimes still call a hydrant a plug, now you know. It's a 200-year-old piece of vocabulary, left over from a time when firefighting meant digging up a street with a shovel before you could even start putting out the fire. Digging up a street mid-emergency is, obviously, not a great system. America needed something faster, and the push to build it would come out of one of the new nation's most important cities, early 1800s. Philadelphia had one of the most advanced municipal water systems in the young United States, run by the Philadelphia Water Works. Its chief engineer was a man named Frederick Graff Sr., and he's one of the strongest candidates historians point to as the true inventor of the fire hydrant. Around 1801, Graff designed a device that didn't require digging up the street at all, a standing pipe connected permanently to the water main, capped at street level with a valve you could simply twist open. No more shovels, no more augers, just a fixed point of access, sitting right there, ready the moment it was needed. In 1802, Thomas Jefferson's government placed the first known order for cast iron fire hydrants, made by a Georgetown cannon foundry run by a man named Henry Foxall, a cannon maker building fire hydrants. Because in early America, The same iron foundries that cast weapons for military were often the only shops in the country with the skill to cast precision metal parts for anything else. By 1803, Graf had improved his own design, moving the valve down into the lower portion of the hydrant, so it stayed permanently connected to main and charged with water at all times. This was the earliest version of what's known as a wet barrel hydrant, and it worked for a while, but it had one enormous, glaring flaw, one that America was about to learn the hard way, on one of the coldest nights in New York City's history. Here's the flaw. A wet barrel hydrant keeps water sitting inside it, under pressure at all times, ready to flow the instant you open the valve. That's great for speed. It's a disaster in the cold, because water freezes. And in the brutal winters of the American Northeast, wet barrel hydrants would freeze solid, or worse, freeze, expand, and crack the iron casing wide open, leaving a burst, useless pipe exactly when a city needed it most. Engineers tried to fight this the old-fashioned way, packing the hydrants with sawdust, straw, even manure, anything to insulate the metal against the cold. It helped a little. It did not solve the problem. And on December 16th, 1835, that problem became a catastrophe. A fire broke out in a 5-story warehouse in Lower Manhattan on one of the coldest nights New York had seen in years. Firefighters raced the scene and found their hydrants frozen solid. The East River was frozen. The Hudson was frozen. There was, in the most literal sense, no water to be had anywhere in the city. The fire tore through block after block of wooden buildings, ultimately destroying somewhere around 700 structures and leveling a huge stretch of what's now the financial district. It's remembered today as the Great Fire of New York. It was a disaster, but it was also a wake-up call. American cities now had undeniable proof that the fire hydrant, as it existed, wasn't good enough. The next great leap forward would come not from Philadelphia, but from a small factory town in upstate New York, and a relentless inventor who held more U.S. patents than almost anyone else alive, second only to Thomas Edison himself. Meet Birdsell Holly. Born in 1820 in Auburn, New York, Holly left school at age 8 and apprenticed as a cabinet maker, then in a machine shop. By his late teens, he was running the place. Over his lifetime, Holly would rack up more than 150 U.S. patents, inventions in pumps, steam fire engines, and eventually central heating systems still used across America today. In 1859, Holly founded the Holly Manufacturing Company in Lockport, New York. After a serious fire tore through the town in 1863, local officials pushed for better fire protection, and Holly saw his opening. He designed something genuinely new, a pumping system that could push water directly into city mains under constant, powerful pressure, using turbine or steam-driven pumps, without needing an elevated water tower or reservoir at all. This was the Holly Fire Protection and Water System, and it changed everything. Instead of relying on gravity from a water tower, cities could now generate strong, adjustable pressure on demand, delivered straight to hydrants around town. In 1869, Holly patented his improved fire hydrant design, U.S. patent number 94,749, and it looked remarkably close to the hydrants you recognize on American street corner today. By the mid-1860s, cities across the U.S. and even parts of Europe had begun adopting Holly's system. Almost all of them. There was one major American city that decided it didn't need Birdsell Holly's fancy new invention. That decision would cost Chicago dearly. Chicago, in the early 1870s, was booming. A city of wood-frame buildings, wooden sidewalks, and wooden roofs packed tightly together, growing faster than almost any city in America. And Chicago officials had looked at Holly's pressurized fire protection system and decided to pass. On the night of October 8, 1871, a fire started. The exact cause still debated, though popular legend blames a cow kicking over a lantern in Mrs. O'Leary's barn, and found the driest conditions imaginable following a summer drought. The fire burned for roughly 3 days. By the time it was finally contained, it killed an estimated 300 people, left about 100,000 residents homeless, and destroyed roughly 3.5 miles of city, including most of its downtown business district. It became one of the most devastating urban disasters in American history, and in its aftermath, Chicago officials did exactly what they refused to do before the fire. They purchased Birdsell Holly's pressurized fire hydrant system. It's a brutal pattern that repeats throughout the history of fire safety in America. The technology to prevent a disaster often exists years before the disaster that finally forces a city to adopt it. Philadelphia had wet barrel hydrants before New York's Great Fire. Holly had his pressurized system before the Great Chicago Fire. Time and time again, American cities learned fire safety lessons written in ash. By the 1880s and 90s, cast iron hydrants based on Holly's design were spreading to nearly every major American city. The hydrant, as a piece of technology, had basically been invented. What came next was refinement and standardization. Here's a problem you might not expect. For decades, American fire hydrants weren't standardized at all. Different cities used different thread sizes on their hose connections, different valve mechanisms, different everything. That might sound like a minor inconvenience, until you remember that American fire departments regularly travel to help neighboring towns fight major blazes, a practice called mutual aid. Imagine driving a fire engine to a burning building in the next town over, only to discover their hydrants don't fit your hoses. It happened, repeatedly. It's one of the quiet disasters in American firefighting history. Help arriving and being useless because of a mismatched screw thread. Slowly, through the late 1800s and into the 1900s, American cities and manufacturers worked toward standardizing hydrant design. Thread sizes, valve types, the works. Two main designs emerge and persist to this day. The dry barrel hydrant, where the main valve sits underground below the frost line, and the barrel stays empty and dry until opened, ideal for cold northern states, and the wet barrel hydrant, which keeps water in the barrel at all times and is common in warmer climates like California and the Southeast, where freezing simply isn't a concern. Around the 1950s, the National Fire Protection Association stepped in with NFPA 291, a recommended nationwide color coding standard. Under the system, a hydrant's body is typically chrome yellow, while the top and caps are painted red, orange, green, or light blue, depending on how much water the hydrant can pump per minute, telling firefighters at a glance whether a hydrant is a trickle or fire hose. It's not federal law. It's a recommendation cities can choose to follow, but it's why. If you've ever noticed a hydrant with a blue top in one neighborhood and a red top in another, that's not decoration. That's a code, quietly telling firefighters exactly what they're working with. Somewhere along the way, the fire hydrant stopped being just infrastructure and became something else entirely, a piece of American cultural furniture. It picked up nicknames along the way. In parts of the country, it's still the fire plug, a direct callback to that original wooden log and auger system from 2 centuries ago. In New York City specifically, old-timers call it a Johnny pump, a nickname that traces back to late 1800s firefighters, who were commonly nicknamed Johnnies. It became a canvas for public art, cities and neighborhoods across America running hydrant painting programs, where local artists and school kids transform ordinary fire hydrants into tiny sculptures. Patriotic themes, cartoon characters, local mascots, painted firefighter helmets, sitting right there on a street corner most people walk past without a second glance. And of course, it became the default universal shorthand for dog bathroom. Every cartoon dog in American media, going back generations, has been drawn lifting a leg at a fire hydrant. So consistently that most people couldn't tell you why that visual joke exists at all. It's just baked into the culture at this point. But no piece of hydrant culture runs deeper or has a longer history than what happens every single summer in cities like New York, when temperatures climb and the hydrants come open. If you grew up in an American city, especially in the Northeast, there's a good chance you have a memory of this. A scorching summer day, a fire hydrant cracked open by someone in the neighborhood, and half the block running to the spray to cool off. This tradition is old, genuinely old. The earliest documented case the New York Times ever covered dates back to May of 1904. A headline reading, "Busy Street Deluge. A little boy's prank," describing a kid who pried open a hydrant at 5th Avenue and 14th Street with a wrench. By the 1930s, the practice was common across working-class New York neighborhoods, especially in tenement districts where public pools were scarce, overcrowded, or simply too far to reach on a hot day. The problem is, a fully open, uncapped fire hydrant doesn't trickle. It unleashes something like 1,000 gallons of water per minute, at a pressure strong enough to knock a child clean off their feet. It also drops water pressure across the whole surrounding grid. which is a serious problem if there's an actual fire nearby that needs that same pressure to fight it. So, starting in the late 1950s, New York City agencies came up with a compromise: the spray cap, a fitted attachment that turns a raging torrent into a gentle, sprinkler-style spray, cutting the flow down to roughly 25 gallons a minute instead of 1,000, while still giving kids a way to cool off. In the summer of 1960, the Police Athletic League handed out 1,000 free spray caps across the city. It didn't end a legal hydrant opening completely. It never really has, but it gave the city and its residents something better than a total standoff. Today, New York's Department of Environmental Protection still runs a summer outreach program, sending teenagers and young adults from the neighborhoods themselves out to explain, hydrant by hydrant, why the safe version matters. And it's measurably worked, with complaint about illegally open hydrants dropping by more than half since the program's early years. It's a small, sun-soaked example of a much bigger story. A piece of firefighting equipment, quietly becoming part of how an entire country remembers its childhood summers. It's easy to romanticize the open hydrant. It's a lot less romantic when you look at the numbers. An uncontrolled, fully open hydrant can push out somewhere between 1,000 and 1,700 gallons of water per minute. On a hot day, in a neighborhood with several hydrants open at once, that's enough to measurably drop water pressure across an entire section of the city's grid, the exact pressure that firefighters may need at that exact moment for an actual fire somewhere nearby. There's also a real safety risk in the force of the water itself. That kind of pressure hitting a small child directly has been documented knocking kids into the street, into moving traffic, or slamming them into the pavement hard enough to cause real injury. An illegal hydrant use isn't just a safety issue. It's against the law in most American cities, carrying fines that can run up to $1,000, and in some jurisdictions, even the possibility of jail time. Cities don't enforce this to be cruel. They enforce it because a firefighter who arrives at a burning building and finds low water pressure because of an open hydrant 3 blocks away is dealing with a life or death problem that didn't have to exist. This is a tension that's followed the fire hydrant since the day it was invented. It's a piece of public safety infrastructure that has to be instantly accessible in emergency, sitting out in the open, completely unguarded, all day, every day, for decades at a time. That tension between total public access and total public safety never fully goes away. It's just been managed generation after generation, a little better than the one before. Which brings us to right now, 2026, and what a fire hydrant actually is today on the street outside your house. Take a walk past a hydrant today, and you're looking at a design that, structurally, hasn't changed all that dramatically since Birds-Ill-Holly's 1869 patent. That's not a lack of innovation. It's a sign of just how well he got it right the first time. A modern American hydrant is almost always made of cast or ductile iron, chosen for its strength, durability, and resistance to corrosion over decades of outdoor exposure. Underground, it connects a municipal water main through a valve, either the dry barrel style common across the colder north, where the actual shutoff valve sits safely below the frost line, or the wet barrel style used in warmer regions, where the barrel is charged with water at all times. There's a breakaway feature worth knowing about too. Most modern hydrants are engineered with a weak point near the base, sometimes called a breakaway flange, specifically so that if a car strikes a hydrant, the top can shear cleanly off without rupturing the underground water main, protecting the water supply and, frankly, reducing the geyser effect you've probably seen in a viral video at some point. Cities across America maintain vast networks of these things, often tens of thousands of individual hydrants per major city, each one flow tested periodically, repainted according to that NFPA color code we talked about earlier, and logged into municipal maintenance systems. It's unglamorous, essential infrastructure work, and increasingly, in 2026, it's starting to get a serious upgrade. For 200 years, a fire hydrant has been a purely mechanical object, a valve, a pipe, a wrench, and a firefighter. That's starting to change. Across American and international cities right now, municipalities are beginning to retrofit hydrants with embedded sensors, devices that continuously monitor water pressure, detect leaks in real time, and flag maintenance issues before a hydrant ever fails during an actual emergency. Industry analysts tracking the space estimate that roughly 45% of hydrants worldwide are expected to have some form of IoT integration by the end of 2026, a number that would have sounded like science fiction to a firefighter even 15 years ago. The appeal is straightforward. Historically, the only way a fire department found out a hydrant was broken, frozen, or blocked was by showing up to an actual fire and discovering it the hard way. A sensor-equipped hydrant can report a pressure drop or a mechanical fault to a city's water department automatically, days or weeks before anyone needs it in an emergency. This connects to a much bigger trend across the entire fire safety industry, a market that analysts project will grow from around $49 billion in 2025 to nearly $53 billion in 2026, driven largely by exactly this kind of smart, connected infrastructure. Sensor fusion, predictive maintenance, cloud-based monitoring dashboards, the vocabulary of a modern tech company, now being applied to a 200-year-old piece of cast iron sitting on a street corner. It's the fire hydrant's quietest revolution yet. Not a new shape, not a new nickname, but a new nervous system, wired into the same object Birds-Ill Holly designed in 1869. So, where does this go from here? A few things seem genuinely likely. First, expect predictive maintenance to become the norm rather than the exception. Instead of cities flow testing hydrants on a fixed yearly schedule, AI-driven systems will increasingly flag exactly which hydrants need attention, based on real sensor data, saving money, and catching failures before they become emergencies. Second, expect deeper integration between hydrants and the broader smart city water grid. As droughts and water scarcity become bigger issues in parts of the American West and South, cities will likely lean harder on hydrant sensor networks, not just for fire safety, but for detecting water main leaks and waste across the entire system, turning firefighting infrastructure into water conservation infrastructure at the same time. Third, and this one's a bit more speculative, but increasingly discussed in fire safety circles, expect hydrants to play a bigger role in the growing wild and urban interface problem as American suburbs push further into fire-prone wilderness areas. Smart hydrant networks, paired with AI wildfire prediction tools, could eventually help fire departments pre-position resources and open specific hydrants automatically before a fire even reaches a neighborhood, rather than reacting once it arrives. None of this replaces the basic genius of the original design, a simple, reliable, physical connection between a fire hose and a city's water supply. What's changing is everything around that core idea, how cities monitor it, maintain it, and predict when it's about to be needed most. Step back for a second, because there's a bigger pattern hiding in all of this. Every major leap forward in fire hydrant history came after disaster, not before one. Philadelphia's early cast iron hydrants existed before the Great Fire in New York in 1835, but that fire still happened because the freeze-proofing problem hadn't been solved yet. Birds-Ill Holly's pressurized system existed years before the Great Chicago Fire of 1871. Chicago just hadn't bought it yet. Standardized hose threads only became a national priority after mutual aid failures embarrassed departments in front of the towns they were trying to help. That's not really a story about fire hydrants. That's a story about how American infrastructure in general tend to improve reactively, painfully, usually one disaster behind where it needed to be. The fire hydrant just happens to be one of the clearest, most visible examples of that pattern, because unlike most infrastructure, it's sitting right there on the sidewalk where you can actually see it. And maybe that's why this unassuming iron object has earned the strange cultural affection it has in America. The summer photos, the painted street art, the cartoon dogs, the nicknames passed down since the 1800s. It's not just a tool. It's a 200-year running record of a country slowly, stubbornly learning to protect itself, one burned neighborhood at a time. Next time you walk past a fire hydrant, on your way to work, on a summer evening, wherever it happens to be, take one more second to actually look at it. That squat iron shape sitting on the corner carries 200 years of American history inside it. A hollowed-out log buried by colonial firefighters. A cannon maker's foundry, repurposed by Thomas Jefferson's government. A frozen New York City in 1835. A stubborn city government in Chicago that learned its lesson far too late. An inventor with more patents than almost anyone in American history. Millions of kids, across 100 summers, running through the spray on the hottest day of the year. And now, Quietly, a sensor humming inside it, reporting back to a city computer somewhere, keeping watch, long after everyone who designed the original has been gone for over a century. It's not just a fire hydrant. It's one of the most American objects there is, unglamorous, essential, learned the hard way, and still standing on the corner, waiting. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the hidden history of everyday American infrastructure, make sure you're subscribed, because this channel does exactly this every single week, taking the things you walk past without a second thought and showing you the incredible story hiding underneath. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.